Hello, this is Ralph Edwards, Acker, Warren from the Concrete Gang, and I'll be presenting a fill-in Concrete Gang show during their well-earned summer break. This is part of an ongoing series called Creatures of the Industry, and that's going to record the people who made our industry over the last 50 years as they reflect on that history and their time in it. And it's good morning from Creatures of the Industry. Our good friend this morning is Brendan Murphy, for many years the face of the CFMEU in Geelong. Good morning, Brendan.
Good morning, Ralph.
How are you?
Yes, quite good in retirement, quite relaxed.
And I take it that was quite a drive down from Forest this morning.
It was, but I've combined a few things. We're meeting up with a few of the other old creatures of the industry today at lunchtime, so it's worked out well.
Good. Would have been a little bit colder than Geelong, which I think was 6 degrees when I arrived.
Yes, it was down to 1 degree.
Now, you've had a few cold mornings in the industry over the years, but let's go back to the beginning. When did you actually start in the industry, and how did you come in?
The first job I ever had was at the Grain Elevator Board, which are those giant Nissan buildings that house all the wheat in Geelong, and it was our job to hang off ropes and spray the roof. Washo was our organiser, and it was a brilliant job because we couldn't spray if it was too windy, we couldn't spray if it was wet, so the job tended to drag out, and it took them 2 years to do what they thought they were going to do in 12 months. They had to do it in the summers of 2 years, and I did the first lot. Then I worked in a Shell refinery.
So what years were these?
Oh, Ralph.
70s, 80s?
Yeah, it would have been probably about 3 years before D-Reg.
So it's early 80s, and at that time, if memory serves me correct, it was a bit up and down in the industry because there had been a bit of a recession under the Fraser government, and it was hard getting work.
Massively, yeah. You know, you had to be able to turn your hand to a few different things. That's why I ended up in Shell refinery, and initially as a TA, and then as a scaffolder. And then they built, it was major construction for Geelong, they built the Bay City Plaza, and I managed to get on there, and by that time it was around D-Reg time, and the industry was in a bit of turmoil, and I slotted in very well.
In fact, I was down there one day at Bayside with you and Johnny, and I think the cops were called.
Yes.
It was another exciting day at Bayside.
Exactly.
Right in the middle of the D-Reg 1986 into 87, but this was 86 if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was a great entrance into the building industry proper. I was a scaffolder on there and got elected the labourers rep on the job. We had, I think it was Mick Young was our organiser. Mick Young and Mick Laidlaw were our organisers, and they kept us pretty well informed of what was going on in other areas of the industry. And if you remember, you probably have a better memory than me, but it was when the Green Book was out and there was pay rises up for grab, and I think it was $45 or something over 3 years. Mm-hmm. But the plumbers had done a deal on the quiet to get...
Heaven forbid.
Yes, exactly. To get something like $78 up front. Anyway, we heard about it, and with the assistance of the two Micks, we got a bit of a campaign going. And we'd heard that the company that built it, which was Taylor Industruct, had paid the whole 45 up front in Melbourne on a couple of jobs. And we also heard about the plumbers' little deal. So we decided we'd have a run for it. So we ended up having a picket out the front of Myers with the assistance of the BLF. We got great propaganda going, saying what's wrong with Geelong workers? They got two heads. Why shouldn't we be paid the same as Melbourne? I think it lasted about a week and a half, and in the end, Myers said to the company, "Get these blokes, out of the front." So they, we won that battle, and it showed me what we could do if we had the right leadership and we all had a bit of a dip. So yeah, that was my first foray into it, and I'd already been going to a couple of the BL meetings with a good friend of mine, Johnny Ubrin, HR Johnny, or BLF Johnny as he was known, and I used to go up to some of the branch meetings at Orr Street, and really liked what I heard, and took out membership and looked for guidance, and when I became steward on other various projects, I'd always look to John Cummins as my wailing wall. I'd take all my problems to him, and he'd give me direction or advice. It was always good advice.
But he used to also, if I remember correctly, point out the window and go, the wailing wall's that way.
There, yeah, he did.
F off.
Yeah. But he'd always
he'd come back.
Follow it up with the way to sort out the problem. And he gave me some great direction just on different projects. I remember we were out at Alcoa redoing the carbon bakes, and your big blue 417 Central Road was on.
Yep.
And it was coming up to Christmas, and I think those blokes had been out of work for about 12 months. Something like that.
6, 7.
And their families, I'd been to the branch meeting and we'd heard their plight and decided to try and organise a bit of a fundraiser. Anyway, I spoke at a couple of meetings, and the Bricklayers Union at the time wouldn't get behind it, wouldn't support it. Anyway, I remember coming up and telling John, grubbies are just a pack of grubs, and I was whinging my guts out. And he just told me to get back onto the job and win the blokes over, which did. It worked. It worked a treat. And then I organised for John and John Sector to come down and thank the boys and give us a bit of a report on the state of the industry. And Alcoa threatened to lock us all in on the job. And we said, if you do that, we'll be withdrawing our labour. And I've still got photos of all the bricklayers. They all came out. They all came out, and everybody gave, because we were on really good money. And the story was that, these guys and their families were going to face Christmas absolutely nothing. And it pulled on their heartstrings, and despite their union and the FIA trying to influence it the other way, it all got up unanimously. And that taught me a good lesson there. If people are uninformed or ill-informed, then don't class them, convince them of the error of their ways.
Well, there's been a few blues around Geelong over the years, and even today, despite the fact that I would have thought people would say that Geelong's a union town, there are still plenty of blues and there's still plenty of non-unionists running around and trying to, shall we say, degrade the wages and conditions. But in the time that you have been, an activist in the construction industry and also as an official for many years, do you think we're actually better now than where we were when you first came in? I mean, health and safety is probably an area that's improved, but the capacity of people to fight for their wages and conditions and so on, do you think we're actually moved ahead in that time?
Personally, I totally agree with the safety side of things, but I think that our capacity to stick by each other has been diminished, and I put it down to maybe it's the conditions that we fought for and won. The less we had, the more unity we seem to have. But unfortunately, safety's the most important thing. I think at least blokes can pretty well guarantee that they'll go home overnight. They don't feel under that pressure to perform for the boss, so you get another day's work. But I don't think we get our story out enough. I would have loved to have seen and you're doing it now, but a bit of a history of where everything came from, a history of the battles, and then I'd like to see it being compulsory reading for anybody who wanted to be a shop steward, just so they know what people went through to achieve these things, and maybe they wouldn't. I just think they'd be better if they were more informed about the struggles that we had, and it was nothing to be on strike for a couple of weeks, and if somebody was really battling, we'd have a whip around. And the fundraisers, I mean, they were great for morale. I used to love going up to the ones up in Melbourne, and then we started doing them down here for our own issues. There was nothing better than a pull-up to get the camaraderie going, I thought, and yeah, we had some great pull-ups in this town.
Not only have you had pull-ups to help individual workers, but there's also, over the years, my memory, been any number of projects undertaken, like the Geelong Unemployed Workers Group, and so on, to try and actually do this on a larger scale and apply it to more people. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because it was a matter which was pretty bloody important through the 80s and 90s.
As you said earlier, we were going through a lull in the industry, and then there was the battle with the BWIU to get recognition in Victoria, and some of us were told blatantly, no, we've been instructed by other officials of other unions not to give you a start, and that's where the Geelong Unemployed Construction Workers Union that came out of that. And the activists, a lot of activists that had spoken up during dereg and pre-dereg had been good stewards, and they couldn't get work, and we had difficult times. But through the Unemployed Construction Workers Union, we were in united voice, and I remember going up and addressing the BWIU SMC and explaining to them that we'd heard that it was Balderstone going to come to Geelong and build a project, a wool scouring plant. And at that stage, they were talking about multi-skilling, how, carpenters would get dogman's tickets, and, they'd do their own mobile scaffolds and all this sort of stuff. And I remember addressing Vince Raffer and others up there and told them, look, whilst we don't support this multi-skilling, don't shut us out. And I was telling John about it, and the FIA organiser was Crook, and I was approached to represent them and didn't want to represent it, but spoke to John, and it was only supposed to be for 6 weeks, and he said no, it'd work out good, because John and others were negotiating to get us a seat at the CFMEU table, and so he advised to go and do it. But as it turned out, this bloke got pretty crook, and I was there for 12 months. But I took all my direction from John, and much to the disgust of a bloke named Bob Smith, who was the head of the FIA. Probably
Flimey by that stage.
Flimey, that's right, yeah, slimy Flimey. And it was a good experience. And Camo just said, represent the blokes as you want to be represented. Don't worry too much about Bob Smith. And we had quite a few run-ins. And he was never short of, Bob Smith was never short of people to report to him what I'd said at meetings. And I just remind him of his saying, you decide, we serve. And he'd say, no, you didn't say that. Anyway, he, thank Christ, he represents working people.
Can I make this observation, brother? Camo did have a habit of asking you to do a bit of a fill-in, and somehow or another, it always ended up going a whole lot longer than anticipated.
Yes.
And can I ask you, is that how come you ended up the CFMEU organiser in Geelong? Was that a short-term gig that became permanent, or what?
No, at that stage, they'd approached me again. I'd gone back on that when this Flimey bloke finally recovered. I'd gone back on the tools, and then I was approached again. So naturally, I went to my whaling wall, and I think he spoke to the powers that be in the CFMEU, because by that time there'd been an accommodation for
early 90s.
Yeah, and I think John more or less said, well, if you don't put him on, he'll go to them. And that was his way of playing chess, I think.
Yeah.
And that's what got me in, and a bit of a baptism of fire. Like you said, he used to say the whaling wall's over there. I said to him, John, who do I go to for direction? And he'd say, well, in this one, we're self-starters. But he always gave me good advice.
So when you began as the CFMEU organiser in Geelong, what would you say was the state of the union and the state of the industry at that time? Were we organised? Was the industry flourishing? When you came in, what did you inherit?
Well, it wasn't the mess that it was during D-Reg. It was, at that stage, Johnny Setko, much to his chagrin, he was put in to organise down in Geelong, and I don't think he liked the travel. So it wasn't the mess. I can't claim any great...
Was the industry prospering at the time? Was there work around?
Yeah, there was a bit of work around at the time. We'd finished the Bay City Plaza. Kenneth had made money available for everything along the foreshore. The wool stores turned into Deakin University. The bus port, which I was a steward on, that was going at the time. There was 3 jobs actually going at the same time, and it was reasonably prosperous. And like I say, Johnny Setker had got in early and done a fair bit of the hard yards. Wayne Flett used to go around with him, and we had a good name.
So the industry in Geelong, as I've always understood it, is in 2 parts. Those who can work local and those who have to go to town.
Correct.
And that has never changed, but it does wax and wane a bit with the work on. And if people can work local, they prefer to work local.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Do you think that over the years that there has been, shall we say, a little bit of an attitude that maybe you don't play up a little bit if you're working local compared to what you might do in town? Or do you think that there is basically a common approach from construction workers in Geelong?
Look, you've got a core of people, I was one of them, that despite common sense, can't hold their tongue. They'll speak up whether it's wise or not. I've been noted for that. But I think I used to love Craig Johnson getting up at meetings and saying, this is the heartland of the union, and this is the heartland of the trade union movement. I think he talked a lot of people into it. And I was lucky enough to organise a bit with Craig, and I just loved the way his bedside manner at meetings. I loved, and his preparedness to work out of hours and address afternoon shifts on shutdowns, and we had some great times. One of them comes to mind where we cooperatively went out pre-shutdown to Geelong Cement and said to them, look, the renewal of the Geelong Area Agreement, which was a jobbing shop agreement, was due for renewal, and we said to the cement works, look, we'd like your shutdown to go smoothly, so why don't we negotiate an interim one? And anyway, they didn't see the need for it. But they had a huge kiln change, and they had to get a special crane over from South Australia to change this kiln. Anyway, we said to them, all right, well, we're going to have a meeting with all the men on the shutdown to give them an update. Anyway, we get a phone call from some of our loyal members, and they let us know that their tactic was going to be to have the kiln all rigged up on night shift and then have it lifted in the air for when we were going to call a meeting. Anyway, I managed to get a hold of Craig, who'd been out probably at some fundraiser or something. He rang me at about 1 o'clock in the morning. I told him about it. We got together at 4 o'clock in the morning and got out there for 5 o'clock. And I can remember the manager, a bloke named Joe Cutler, big bloke. And we're walking down the driveway and he's done a double take. He's turned around, seen us, and that was brilliant. So we stopped the crane being utilised to lift the kiln out, so they couldn't claim it was a safety issue. And we reported to the troops. The troops all went home. Myself and Craig, I was losing patience with it. But we negotiated till about 11 o'clock that night, and we got the agreement, and that became the renewal of the Geelong Area Agreement. But what the bastards did at the end of the shutdown, they taped us during negotiations and took us to the Arbitration Commission. And it was, I learned not to ever trust, not that I ever did, but I didn't trust bosses in any shape or form after that.
Well, nothing's changed.
No, exactly.
Can't complain about bosses behaving like bosses. But anyway,
exactly.
I'm just interested in, because you're also not just the Geelong organiser, you're also looked after the Western District. And I'm interested in this, perhaps, uncertainty between country and city. Because Geelong is a city, but it's also in the country. And that I would have thought would have added to the difficulties of organising. And in fact, motivating people who come from a country town in Western District up to Geelong to work, just as much as it is a problem between someone coming from Geelong and going and working in, say, Horsham or something like that. I would have thought it would have added a degree of difficulty to the whole thing.
Oh yeah, it did, but we had an unprecedented boom down in the Western District, and we even to the point where we went and spoke to the Shire and said to them, look, there's some projects you've got targeted now that you've had on the books since the 60s. Why don't you hold off the permits on those jobs until some of these major refurbs of Nestles and Warrnambool Cheese and Butter, which had major projects going, but then you had shopping complexes and the police law courts and police station and a range of other...
And that's just Warrnambool.
Yeah, and it was either boom or bust, and the locals were missing out because, yes, they'd get on one of those projects, but then Labor would have to come from Melbourne, and one of the things I discovered in those regional areas, if you are seen to be maximising opportunities for the locals, be it the subby or their workers, because at the end of the day, if the subby gets the job, the worker gets the job. And if you take that attitude wherever you go, they'll stand by it. They'll do pretty well whatever you want. And I was lucky because I had Maury Hill organising with me down that neck of the woods. And he'd come down every now and again. And just because of his doggedness, I used to say, well, if I can't get it sorted, I'll have to bring Maury down. And that helped me no end. I remember there was a job getting done at Nelson, a new bridge, and we'd heard from Portland that the blokes weren't happy. So I drove down first, had a bit of a talk to the blokes, said to the company, no, the VBIA should apply on this job, and side allowance and all the rest of it, and said I'd be back in a week. Anyway, they contacted Vic Rhodes, and I believe it was Jerry Benstead's father, who was a...
Jimmy?
Yeah, they said, well, what do we do? He said, well, where are you set up? And they said, we're on the Victorian side of the bridge. He said, I think you better negotiate with them. In the meantime, the company, and I can't think of their name now, but they contacted the AWU. The AWU came down, went into the office, spoke to the boss, took off, didn't speak to the blokes who were wearing wetsuits and everything, working down under the bridge, doing footings and all sorts of things. And that really disgusted them. And then we rolled in and they said, oh, look, you'll have to give us a bit of time. He introduced Maury. And I said, that's fine. I want to have a look over your equipment. Anyway, we struck a deal there, and these guys, all to a man, joined the CFMEU, and it was a great victory. But I had a lot of good experiences with Maury, and like I say, just the mention of his name, especially where cranes were involved. Yeah, no, I don't know whether they respected him or they were just shit scared. But he done me a treat down there. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Just thinking back to some of the big jobs that were out in the regional areas, obviously the mineral sands project. You mentioned a couple already, Nestle down at Dennington.
Warrnambool Cheese and Butter.
Warrnambool Cheese and Butter, Koroit.
Yes. Yeah.
And then, of course, there were a number of jobs in Portland over the years. And I would have thought, Warrnambool Base Hospital, these would have kept a lot of people going over a long period of time. Or is that not necessarily the case, that it was a lot patchier than it actually looked?
What they tried to do, and there was guys there, and I know you knew a few of them, that they were construction workers, but opportunities for them to work in their own backyard were very few and far between, basically because they weren't backward in stand-up. Good workers, good solid workers, not lazy by any stretch of the imagination, but they expected the same sort of representation and the same sort of safety as they'd seen and experienced in Melbourne. And it was my job to try and make sure those blokes got work. And by that, they'd win blokes over for you. I didn't have to spend a hell of a lot of time in the pubs down there after hours, which was good because I got caught a couple of times and not good for your health. But it was a good experience, and I met some great blokes there, and they did. Once they knew you were genuine, then they'd talk to the young ones and say to them, this is the only way to go. And we had some interesting battles.
And just on that, because not everyone appreciates the stress and difficulties that come with being a union organiser, one, and two, a union organiser that's making the effort, earning their money. I would have thought that in a regional town, separated from Melbourne Metro, not far, but you're out of the loop in Melbourne. Then you've also got the rural areas and so on. It takes its toll. Just the travelling, I would have thought, takes its toll.
Yeah, definitely. I know, I think it was Dave Riddell. He ran off the road and rolled a car, looking after that area. And I came to the conclusion, I used to try and cover as much as I could. But then I worked out you don't get to the end because it's just an ongoing thing. And it does take its toll on family and just having to stay at that stage because of the amount of work down there, having to stay away overnight, and that it was it does take its toll. But
and for stewards too, they're also isolated.
Yeah, exactly.
And if it wasn't for mobile phones, the contact would be even less. Going back to the 70s and the 80s before mobile phones, basically it was a landline. If you couldn't get to a landline, you're in trouble.
Well, yeah, and the bosses made good use of the fact that as soon as you hit town, by the time you got to the next job, everybody knew you were in town. Every company knew, he's on his ways, It used to work as a bit of a bush telegraph. But we, down in Geelong, we started having our own sub-branch meetings or shop stewards meetings, and we got those blokes from Warrnambool to come up and made them feel that they were part of the bigger organisation, and it was great. They and the feedback we got off jobs, they'd hear rumours and we've heard a job's going to start here and this one's got the job and all this sort of stuff. The amount of information that came from those out of work stewards was
very
invaluable. Yeah. It was and we had blokes down on projects down in Apollo Bay, Lorne. We just had the funeral of a real bloke who used to live in Geelong, and he was a steward on small jobs here, and I got him to go to Lorne to a sewage treatment plant they were building for Lorne, and then put him down in Apollo Bay on the next sewage treatment plant, and he ended up finishing his days down there. He never left, and he was a great source of information for anything that was coming up, even the region. Even after he'd retired, he still kept an active participation, and he's just recently passed. And that's why I think this podcast is a great idea, because there's too many of them that we didn't get their stories, and I think let's get them while we can.
Just on that subject, because I've got a few other subjects to talk about, but just on that subject, are there people in Geelong, the Western District, who you think really contributed to the development of unionism in the area and also to the development of the CFMEU, who maybe need a little bit of recognition? Because I would have thought that some of the secretaries of the Geelong Trades and Labour Council made a huge contribution. People like the Southwest Trades and Labour Council, those people were isolated and basically flew the flag in the most difficult of times. I mean, unemployment makes life difficult for unions because people not working don't really connect as much as they should, and so on. The base here I would have thought was good, and I'd just like you to reflect on that.
The base was good, but not only that. I think, like I said earlier about fundraisers, they didn't have to be members of the union. But if our stewards heard about some family that was in a bad way or whatever, and I can remember numerous, you'd hear of a young kid that their life expectancy was, not good, and had nothing to do with the construction industry, but they were known in, say, Warrnambool. And then we'd organise that, and I think that gave us a great respect amongst farmers. I mean, normally, and nothing gives you goosebumps like helping a family that's in those sorts of situations. And we had some, like you said, we had some great blokes that fitted that bill, and all they needed was somebody to, what's the word, light the fire under it. And once they'd been to a few fundraisers and then they heard about something, then they give it a go. And some of the best times of my time in the industry were, fundraisers and chopping people out. It was just second to none.
And the relationship with other unions in the area was highly developed. And my memory is, with the metal workers of the ETU and so on, there was constant interplay where people not only helped each other on a more personal level, but also in industrial sense.
Exactly.
And there's some good agreements came out of this area.
Yes, and I don't want to praise him up too much because I'm having lunch with him, but Craig Johnson was behind a lot of that trailblazing of agreements, and great support from the ETU. The plumbers, they wax and wane a little bit and they tend to isolate themselves, but during my time, there was some good organisers that showed, good unity and solidarity. And because we were all in the same boat, we'd help each other out. If we had to go to Warrnambool or address the gas plant down at Port Campbell and, any of the major projects, it was good to consult before we'd have the meeting and, get everybody's views. And then, if an organiser needed backing up, you could do that and help explain to the masses why we were doing something. And we had good unity for the best part of it.
Now, some of the projects that have been developing in Geelong in recent times has been more focused on the CBD. Has that brought about a change in how the union operates and how the industry's been operating? Because I would have thought that a lot of people are coming now from Melbourne to Geelong.
Exactly.
Whereas traditionally it's always the other way.
Yeah, and companies, and I can remember one company, I won't mention their name, but one of the principals of that company I ran into. Anyway, he's retired. It was Tony Isaacson. And he'd done a couple of jobs in Geelong, and I said, well, what do you think about working in Geelong? He said, listen, I love it. He said, but I tell everybody else you're a pack of bastards down here, so they'll stay away. But and that has been a problem. But for the main part, once they met us and they know that we want a successful job too, but we want it done safely. And if we give undertakings, we'll abide by them, and we won't give you nutters. As I used to say to them, if I give you a nutter, he might give you grief, but he'll give me grief as well. So we get most of the stewards have worked out really well to the point where Cairns, since they first came to Geelong, they've done a hell of a lot of projects in Geelong. The football ground, the Geelong Hospital, St John of God Hospital, schools around the traps. They've had a good feed out of Geelong, and they employed a lot of Geelong contractors. So, once we got over, the
reputational issues.
Yes.
But just on the subbies, because that's another area which is undergoing some change, because most of the subbies in Geelong tended to look to Melbourne to work for continuity of work.
Well, had to for continuity.
But
yeah.
with the WorkSafe building and so on, I would have thought that a lot of your subbies down here would now have developed to the point where, one, they've probably improved their act. Two, they're improving the requirements of the major contractors, but also the experience means they're doing a better quality job.
Yeah, I agree with that. But through our efforts, I mean, I remember we had contractors down here that were, what would you call them, probably just second tier. And we'd say to builders like out at Morn Ponds there, look, if you maximise opportunities for local contractors, all you'll get out of us is cooperation. And we said, for your earthworks, and they said, oh, we always use Delta. We said, well, that's no good to us. Anyway, they took on board what we said, and there's a company in Geelong that grew massively on that project with their assistance. I'm trying to remember who they were. But old, what's his name? We got him on there, and he was about 75 not out. O'Connor.
Oh, yeah.
Kevin O'Connor.
Cobber.
Yeah, Cobber. And they educated these contractors. Even we said to the best of your ability, don't bring any plasterers down. We've got any amount of plasterers there. If you have to, split the contract. You know, if you think they're not up to scratch to do the whole lot, split the contract and give it to two Geelong contractors, which they did, and it worked to their satisfaction, and we maximised opportunities for our men. Well, they're all members, but I like to do the Geelong.
The Fortress Geelong does require a passport.
Yes. Yeah.
But that is the basis on which you build an industry. And then if we've got a capacity to move backwards and forwards between Metro Melbourne and Geelong and the Western District, I would have thought that was in the interest of everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not sure the builders always accept that.
No, they you know, for whatever reason, and we would try and strictly enforce the extra travel from Melbourne. And then we'd say to bosses, listen, we haven't got two heads. Our blokes are capable. You can save that money by employing locally. And, you know, it'd be a suck at the sea type thing. They'd put on a couple. And I'd just say to the blokes, listen, my ability to get another bloke on depends on you doing the right thing. So even if the bloke was a little bit, you know, not the hardest worker, if you knew that his work ethic would count for the next bloke getting a job, they tend to...
The bloke he's having a drink with after work.
Yeah, exactly. And we played on that, and, you know, I reckon I can probably count on me one hand the nutters we've had in the industry, but I wouldn't class them. Not on radio.
No, we always have a problem, but people have a right to work, and we do what we can.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, in terms of the health and safety, you're obviously happy that conditions and standards have improved, but has the influx of WorkSafe into this town on a permanent basis, as I look at the horizon and see their sign, has it actually improved?
I believe it's deteriorated. In all honesty, and I don't know whether it was because, you know, different hierarchies that were running WorkSafe had different attitudes. But I can remember when they used to be, not all the time, and they didn't always fall into line with what we wanted, but they would be proactive. And I've spoken to a few that have since left WorkCover, and even they say it. They don't feel that they're as active as they should be, which, you know, you can look at the positives. If they don't do it, we'll bloody do it. You know, and I never used to call on them a hell of a lot, but the bosses used to call them after we'd
give them a touch-up.
Yeah. I remember a good instance. It was three of us when they did the Bowen Bridge. The conditions were a disgrace. You've got people rowing under the bridge, rowing practice, and people on bikes, and they're doing walkways on either side. The company that were doing it didn't have an EBA, but that was, you know, really immaterial. The toilet facilities, they had no toilet facilities, just public toilets. And somebody had an accident in them and left a deposit on the floor, and it had been there for days. Anyway, the job got closed down, and I'd taken Murray had retired, and I'd taken him out for the day to a major job just to catch up with the boys, and Maury happened to be with me. So we called into the job and we had to close it down. It was just an accident waiting to happen. And there's a photo of us closing the job down, and Maury's in the photo, and it's got independent consultant Maury Hill. And then I saw Tommy Watson the next day and said, "Oh, Maury wants to know where to send his bill for his consultancy." But and I remember this WorkSafe bloke. He rang me up, going off his head, saying, "Is this just a get up because they haven't got an EBA?" I said, "Get down to the job and have a look." And now he's pretty high up. Anyway,
it just seems to be that what used to be a given, that WorkSafe would walk on and give them a notice. Yeah. If there was a problem, give them a notice. Where it went to in the long term was always, I suspect, a matter of negotiation between WorkSafe and the boss. But that proactive thing has disappeared.
Yeah.
And if it's disappeared in the city where WorkSafe is actually quartered, then that's a problem.
Exactly. I really don't know how they explain their relevance, to be honest. If your issue isn't to go around and be proactive and stop accidents, then what do? You just go to where the accidents have already happened. Anyway, luckily I live down in Forest, and we don't see a lot of major construction down there. But I do hear quite a lot.
As long as you don't see the meat inspectors.
Yes, exactly.
Little joke between us here. Now, in terms of the industry, what do you think have been the major improvements, and maybe, like WorkSafe, what have been the major disappointments in your mind? There's a vast number of issues that could be covered in that, but what sticks in your mind?
I think health and safety, training and career path for the non-trades, and also the carpenters. I mean, training's available to everybody within the union. I think probably training and education that provides a career path has been great. I mean, whatever your bent was, if you wanted to be a scaffolder, they train you up. Unfortunately, with deregulation, it went the other way, where you could get a scaffold ticket in 2 weeks and then be on a shutdown hanging off the cat cracker trying to do a drop scaffold. But yeah, that and just even the bosses. My line was always, if you worked for Alcoa or you worked for Fords, it was in their interest to develop good, safe work methods. Whereas in construction, it was if you can get a bloke to hang by his ankles, I'm talking about an actual bloke who got tied by his ankles to go inside a pipe to grind the inside of the weld, they'd take that chance because they could save so much money. But I think that's largely disappeared. You've still got your cowboys, but not to the extent that it used to be in the early days of the industry.
What about conditions? Redundancy, inclement weather, these sorts of things. What do you reckon were the outstanding things in your time in the industry?
Well, I think you've got to wait. I think most construction workers have got to wait until they retire to work out how good superannuation is, and the fact that with CBUS set up as it is, and I hope it always stays that way, where we've got a major say or an equal say in our investments, and I mean that's been a godsend for construction workers. It set me up to enjoy my retirement, and so that's. I always think how lucky I am that superannuation was brought in when it was brought in. The redundancy is another great achievement, and long service leave used to be only available to the hierarchy of the industry, and all those sorts of things. And I think back to the likes of Norm Gallagher and others, demanded that for the workers. I've got good memories of those campaigns, and there's been some great gains there. Safety, superannuation, redundancy, all those sort of things, and your career path. The union assisting you with your career path.
Are there any conditions, benefits you think we've lost in the time, or have become more difficult to enjoy?
Yeah, probably leisure time. I think too many guys are working too many hours and feel the obligation, even though they're getting taxed to buggery. I wish blokes wouldn't live so much or depend so much on massive hours, because I reckon that takes a toll on your family, and just your own ability to enjoy life. Yeah, that's about the downside of it, I think.
Now, are there any particular parts of the agreements that we have these days which you think were breakthroughs? I mean, wages is always an issue, but it's sometimes the conditions. I always say that the best part of the award was always the inclement weather clause, but, because it makes the difference between enjoying a job and not.
Yeah.
Because if you're getting flogged in shit conditions, it's very hard.
That was a great achievement, and as long as that gets the younger ones recognised, never mind, they might say, but it's only 10 yards through the rain. So listen, when the boss starts paying your workers' comp for getting the flu, maybe we'll consider it. But the inclement weather is something that was hard fought for, and I'd hate anybody to look towards trading that off in any way, shape or form. There's a few things that, I've always had a bit of a parochial attitude, and I just hope that we all work under the same agreement and same conditions. We never get to a point where you get a lesser rate if you're in a regional area. The mud's the same, the fucking, the wind and cold's usually fucking worse. Yeah, I just hope we never get to that sort of a situation where we're doing deals or trading off things like participation in mixed metals agreements and those sorts of things. They were great achievements, and I don't want to see blokes missing out on those things just because they live in the country. As long as we apply it across the board, then our members who pay the same union dues as the guys in Melbourne feel like they're equal citizens.
Now, I'll put this to you. If there is an achievement made in agreements and so on, would you agree that there might be a bit of an attitude that once we've got it, we're going to keep it? Because it just seems to me that a lot of people don't appreciate that things are won and then they're not necessarily just taken away. They can drift away.
Yeah. Well, that's why and I was alluding to that earlier. I just think the young blokes, and I'm not blaming them, but a lot of them have never been through any major time in the grass. I think if they got a better understanding of what some people went through to achieve those, maybe they'd be a bit more protective of them. I really do think, and I don't know of another way, that your shop stewards should be educated by us, by the union, to get out and educate the workers. There's been some great blokes that did it over the years, but then there's some others that, I don't know whether they haven't been educated enough or encouraged enough to get out there and sell the message. Like old, what's his name used to say, get out where the hammers whack.
Yep.
What was his name? Get out where the hammers whack.
Marco
Masters, yeah.
Now, on the reflection, what do you think you achieved as, one, an activist in the union, because you're a member of a number of unions, as we all were because we worked across industries in those days. Now it's only one construction area. And also as an official. Is there anything that stands out in your mind that you are really pleased about? I think I know the answer, but I think I'd like you to say it.
I think my major achievement would be what I learned from what I saw when I first came into the BLF, my ability to weld the troops together, have the troops trust me, and know that I had an army behind me. Like I used to say to some stewards, don't go off too far and turn around and see that you've got nobody behind you. Yeah, I reckon that.
Brother, if you don't mind me saying so, if you're getting recognised for doing the job, that's an achievement. And I think that's a good way for people to judge whether you are doing the job. And finally, because we've gone over an hour now, and I'm quite happy to keep talking, but are there any thoughts that you've had as we've spoken that you would like to reiterate or maybe add to by some examples of people who've made a contribution, issues in the area or your area? over the years which need to be highlighted. I would have thought that going back to the collapse of the Corio overpass bridge, that was a big incident. Some of the picket lines and Godfrey Hirst, I think, was one, and the scouring plant and so on.
Shell refinery. And there were challenges, but Shell, they were forever trying to challenge us. And whilst we didn't have a big workforce in there, we had civil blokes in there. We always backed the other unions, and they backed us. I can remember, we were standing on the railway line to stop the trains going into Shell, and the police horses, where we all had to link our arms in front of Shell refinery, and the police horses charged us. And I remember my partner getting a horse stood on her foot, and she had a black toe for God knows, and we had another bloke who had a colostomy bag on, and I had to scream at him to get away from the picket line because of the horses. Yeah, those sorts of things. But what I would, as soon as you give me the opportunity, and I've been pushing this ever since I found out what a great idea it is. Men's sheds for our members. And Ralph, you would have met some members that are at a loss once they retire. Well, the government, for whatever reason, and I don't often pat Kennett on the back, but with his Beyond Blue and the funding that's been made available, and pretty well equally to rural areas and the cities for these men's sheds, they are a great service we can exploit. And when I say exploit, I mean it in the best way, because the old blokes and I'm going to a lunch shortly, and we get the old blokes there, and if you can point them in the direction, or you can assist their men's shed or help them form a men's shed, and then you might be on a job where the company could prevail upon, listen, any chance you could do a little concreting job for this mob, or and most companies, when they know it's for a men's shed and they know it's not a fiddle, they're more than happy. And I was pleasantly surprised with the amount of support that companies gave to men's sheds, even to the point where they drive down to have a look to see, oh no, they're fair dinkum, they have got a men's shed and they are doing this, that and the other. And I think it's appreciated by the retirees, even if they're not construction workers. I mean, I can remember a couple of people saying, I didn't know the unions got into this sort of thing, and it puts us in a good light, and it provides, because you think about the amount of camaraderie you had in your working life, and then all of a sudden you're retired, and, the missus she's already well organised as far as her day, and you're just sitting around. But I'm convinced that that's the way to go. Get into them and support them, and then tell your retiring members, go along, have a look at it. If that one's not to your liking, go to another one. There's plenty of them. I've been to them all over. Gippsland, down there, they make their own coffins. Well, not their coffins, they flog them off. They make cheap coffins. And there's ones down in Colac that the guys, a lot of them are mechanical minded, so they buy old cars, do them up, but do them up properly, not bog jobs and all the rest of it, and then they on-sell them, and that goes towards not only themselves, but they've got other areas like helping out with disabled kids and all that sort of stuff. It's great for the community, and the money's there.
Can I put it to you, once an activist, always an activist?
Oh, definitely, and
that makes you feel good?
Yeah, exactly. I still love it every time there's a fundraiser or something like that, going along and being a party to it. I remember we had a campaign down there when Telstra were going to put it was Optus, we're going to put a tower in town without any consultation, and instead of going on a farm, the council were going to get the money. Anyway, we had a picket down there, and I don't think there'd ever been a picket in Forest. We had a march from the Market Square to the council offices. We had both Senator Henderson and Darren Cheeseman falling over themselves to chop us out. It was at an opportune time, and both claimed victory at the end of it, but we got rid of the tower, and where the tower was going to go is where our men's shed is now. So it taught the town that if you stick together, they all didn't fall in line and become militant unionists, but they know what can be achieved if you all stick together.
Now, just on a final point, it's often the older members and those who have retired, and they say that the industry is not as fun as it used to be. Now, fun doesn't mean stupidity and everyone laughing at someone's idiocy, but in terms of the stress in the industry now compared to when we were young blokes working in the industry, it just does seem to be different. It's far more mechanical and exploitative in some ways than it used to be.
And regimented, and there's not the... maybe it's because, they've worked out how to squeeze that extra bit out of you. And
well, we used to go home for 24 hours.
That's it.
We didn't have RDOs to start with. Then we won one RDO a month, and all the hours and that you used to have to work. I think a homer did everyone a bit of good.
Yes, exactly. But, I still put it down to a lot of the younger ones are getting themselves into, I've heard of blokes saying, I don't want to go on strike. I've got a mortgage on that other place that I'm buying. And, this sort of stuff. A lot of them have got to compromise their morals to a certain point. Well, not their morals, but their conditions to a certain degree. And, a mate of mine who's a steward out at Avalon, he had to tell the blokes there was no work on a Saturday. I couldn't believe it. At least down the country, they don't work anywhere near as much because they cherish their local footy and all that sort of stuff. And the meetings, some of the meetings we used to have. I can remember Tommy Watson on the stump and Dean Myler, oh God. They could talk. And then you had other blokes that were just mesmerising and some of the marches that we used to go on. I remember when Como was supposed to get out of jail and we marched and then called the jobs off.
Yep.
Called them down and one wouldn't come, so somebody must have leant on the fire alarm and they all had to come down. And then the judge threatened not to let him out if we didn't shut up in court. No, God. And his name was Cummins too, wasn't it?
Yep, Mr. Justice Cummins.
Yeah.
On a point that I think has probably come out of this conversation, it's not only the individual in the union, in the industry, but it's how we interact with people in the union, in the industry and in the community. I just get the feeling, and I'd just like you to comment, that maybe that relationship has broken down.
Yeah, and I think about it all the time. I mean, it was only the other day, I was thinking about Dominic Amato and there was groups of people, like the people at the Vicky Market, people that parks were saved for, and Gallagher didn't want it all documented, but, the things that he did, looking after, drying people out and, if they were out of jail, he'd help them and, a lot of...
Well, long-term relationship with Father Brosnan.
Yeah, he never went round sproking it, and just a lot of history there that, I don't know whether it's because we're more corporatised or...
Well, that is a real issue, because the solidarity, the personal relations, the community sort of involvement, I just get the impression that, like me, you've probably seen a change that maybe not for the better.
Yeah, and really, that stands you in good stead. That grew us, I think.
Yeah, and it can be recreated.
Yeah, well, I think it needs to be. I really do. I think it behoves us to do it. And anyway, we'll see...
Passage of time.
Yes. I hope people that can take us that way end up in positions of decision.
Yeah. Right, is there any other issues you'd like to reflect on?
The only thing I'd say is I'd like to let everybody know that there is definitely life after the construction industry. And when I told my grandson, who lives with me, that I was going to do a podcast, he said, mention me. He played soccer last night. He plays in the under-13s and he kicked 3 goals. And I'm extremely proud of him. So if this does get an airing, Hamish, I did mention you.
Well done. Thank you very much, brother. That was Brendan Murphy talking to Creatures of the Industry. And you're going to be remembered through a whole lot of broadcasts, I hope, over the journey and also on the union website and so on. Brendan Murphy, thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks, Ralph.
You have been listening to Creatures of the Industry. the Concrete Gang's fill-in show for this summer, and there will be more interviews to come over the following weeks and hopefully an ongoing series well into the future. Thank you for listening.
Produces mighty profits for